My love, do you still have any dirty clothes that needs to be washed?
Can't you see I'm on call? Foolish girl. Hurry up and get me my food.
Ebuka, please, talk to me. I'm sorry. I will find some money.
Eat first. You need strength.
You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Amaka, no one compares to you.
When I finish my apprenticeship, I will marry you. Ebuka's voice was soft, convincing, wrapped in promises that sounded too sweet to question. Amaka looked at him, her eyes shining with hope, her heart already surrendering to a future that had not yet been built. From that moment, everything changed. She began cooking for him, waking up earlier just to prepare meals he never paid for, smiling as she handed him plates of food like a devoted wife in waiting. Eat first, she would say gently. You need strength. Ebuka would grin, praising her beauty. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, Amaka. No one compares to you. And just like that, her heart would melt again. But soon, sweet words were no longer enough for him. I need money, he would say casually, stretching his hand like it was her duty. And the moment she hesitated, the moment she whispered, I don't have, his face would darken. Silence would follow. Days of cold shoulders, days of punishment. He would ignore her completely, walking past her like she didn't exist. Amaka would panic, her chest tightening with fear. Ebuka, please, talk to me, she would beg, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, I will find something. Even when she had done nothing wrong, she apologized. Even when she was struggling, she borrowed money just to keep him happy. Slowly, quietly, without realizing it, Amaka began to lose herself. The mirror no longer reflected the radiant young woman she used to be. Her once neat hair became rough and unkempt. Her clothes lost their brightness, worn and tired like her spirit. The glow that once turned heads faded into exhaustion. And still, she held on, because she believed in a promise that was slowly destroying her. Before we continue with this life lesson story, kindly take a moment to support this channel by subscribing. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And to every beautiful queen watching, listen carefully. Love can come unexpectedly. It can feel right. It can sound sweet. But never allow a man to turn your kindness into a tool for your own destruction. Know your worth. Understand your place in a man's life, and never be afraid to walk away when respect is no longer served. Your heart is precious. Protect it. Now, come with me. Let me take you back to the very beginning, where it all started, where hope was still innocent and pain had not yet found its way. This is the story of an understanding girlfriend, Amaka.
Amaka was the kind of woman people noticed without trying. A striking beauty with natural elegance, glowing skin, and a quiet strength that spoke louder than words. But behind that beauty was a life weighed down by responsibility. Every morning, before the sun even thought of rising, Amaka was already awake, tying her wrapper, arranging her goods, preparing food, and setting up her small roadside stall where she sold food items and daily essentials. And long after the streets had gone silent, when others had returned home to rest, she was still there, counting little profits, planning how to stretch every coin. Because for Amaka, it was never just about herself. It was about the parents growing older back in the village, waiting for the money she sent every month. It was about her younger siblings, whose school fees rested on her shoulders. Sometimes she would sigh softly and whisper to herself, God, just give me strength. Yet, even with all she carried, her heart remained soft. When hungry children passed by her stall, staring at her pots with longing eyes, she would call them gently. Come, take. No child should sleep hungry. When customers pleaded, Amaka, I will pay you later, she would smile and nod, even when she knew some would never return. Her kindness was her nature, not something she forced. Her friends, however, saw things differently. Ngozi, sharp-tongued and fiercely protective, would often shake her head and say, Amaka, one day this your good heart will put you in trouble. Adaze, calm and thoughtful, would add softly, kindness is good, my dear, but not everyone deserves it. Amaka would only smile, brushing off their worries. God will provide, she would reply, her voice full of quiet faith. But somewhere else in the same city, fate was already moving. Ebuka, a young man full of charm and confidence, worked as an apprentice in a mechanic workshop. Among his peers, he was known for his smooth tongue and fearless attitude. Leave that one for me, he would often say with a grin. There is nothing I cannot talk my way into. One afternoon, dusty from the workshop, but still carrying his usual confidence, Ibuka walked towards Amaka's store. He stopped, stared at her for a moment, then smiled in a way that felt intentional. Ah, so this kind beauty still exists? He said, shaking his head slowly. Amaka looked up, slightly confused. Excuse me? Ibuka stepped closer, resting his hand on the store. I said, you are the most beautiful woman in this entire city. I have been passing this road, and today I decided to confirm if my eyes were deceiving me. Amaka blinked, caught off guard, a soft blush creeping onto her face. She wasn't used to such bold attention. You are joking, she said quietly, trying to focus on arranging her goods. Ibuka laughed lightly. Joking? If beauty was money, you would be the richest woman alive. Amaka couldn't help it. She smiled, a shy, genuine smile that revealed just how innocent her heart still was. And just like that, without her knowing, something had begun. Ebuka did not disappear after that first day. Instead, he became a constant presence at Amaka's store, like someone who had found a place he never intended to leave. At first, it was small things. Amaka, give me bread and tea, I will pay you later, he would say with an easy smile. She would hesitate for a second, then nod. Okay, don't forget, oh. But he always forgot. The next day, it would be rice. Another day, it would be stew and meat. Each time, the same line, the same promise, I will pay you later. And somehow, he never did. Instead, he paid her with words, sweet, endless words that wrapped around her heart like a gentle trap. Do you know you're the only woman that makes this city beautiful? He would say, leaning casually against her stall. My future wife must be this beautiful, oh. Amaka would laugh shyly, trying to hide the way her heart skipped. Slowly, without realizing it, she began to do more. She started setting food aside just for him. Ebuka, I cooked something special today, she would say, serving him with care. Sometimes she wouldn't even mention money. She just wanted him to be happy. Her friends noticed. Ngozi frowned deeply one afternoon. Amaka, this man is eating your sweat for free. Adiaze added softly, love does not feed on empty promises, my dear. But Amaka shook her head, defending him with quiet loyalty. He is just struggling, like everyone else. When he stands, he will remember me. Her voice carried belief, strong and unshaken. Then one evening, as the sun was setting and the sky painted gold, Ebuka sat quietly, watching her as she packed up her store. His voice dropped, softer than usual. Amaka, do you trust me? She paused, looking at him. Why are you asking? He leaned closer, his eyes steady. When I finish my apprenticeship, I will marry you. The world seemed to pause for a moment. The noise of the street faded. Amaka's heart beat loudly in her chest. You mean it? She whispered. Ebuka smiled, nodding slowly. I don't joke with things like this. You are the woman I want. That was all it took. That one sentence became everything to her. It became her hope on difficult days, her strength when money was tight, her reason to keep giving without question. It became the quiet voice in her heart that said, "Endure, your future is secure." And from that moment, Amaka didn't just care for Ebuka, she invested in him. Her time, her energy, her money, her love, all poured into a promise that felt real but was slowly becoming her emotional prison.
What started as sweet words slowly turned into something heavier, something that pressed on Amaka's chest without her fully understanding it. Ebuka no longer just came to eat, now he came with requests. "Amaka, I need money," he would say, stretching his hand like it was nothing. At first, she gave what she could, even when it left her with almost nothing. But one day, her voice came out low and uncertain. "Ebuka, I don't have today." The change in his face was immediate. His smile disappeared, replaced by irritation. "You don't have?" he repeated coldly. "So what have you been doing with your money?" Amaka blinked, confused. I sent money home and..." He cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Forget it." And just like that, he withdrew. No calls, no visits. When he passed her store, he looked away like she didn't exist. Days stretched into silence, heavy and suffocating. Amaka's heart raced with fear. "Did I offend him? Did I do something wrong?" she whispered to herself. The silence broke her faster than any harsh words could. She went to meet him, her voice trembling. "Ebuka, please, talk to me." He said nothing. "I'm sorry," she added quickly, even though she didn't understand what she was apologizing for. "I will find the money." And she did. She borrowed from neighbors, from friends, from anyone willing to help, just to see him smile again, just to hear him call her my woman. Ngozi could not hold back her anger anymore. "Amaka, this man is draining you," she snapped one afternoon. "Can't you see it?" Amaka shook her head stubbornly, her voice defensive. "You don't understand him. He is under pressure. I am the only one he has." Adaeze sighed deeply, exchanging a worried glance with Ngozi, but Amaka was too far gone to listen. Then one evening, everything escalated. Ebuka appeared at her stall, looking restless and annoyed. "I need a place to stay," he said bluntly. Amaka frowned slightly. "What happened?" He clicked his tongue. "That foolish boy I stay with is making noise. He says I don't contribute to rent. Imagine." Amaka's heart softened immediately. "So, where will you go?" she asked gently. Ebuka shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I will sleep outside." That was all she needed to hear. Without thinking twice, she said, "You can stay with me." Ebuka looked at her, then nodded like it was expected. That night, he moved in. And from that moment, everything changed completely. Amaka became more than a girlfriend. She became his provider, his caretaker, his everything. She cooked for him every day, making sure he ate well. She gave him a place to sleep, a roof over his head. She washed his clothes, cleaned up after him, attended to his needs without complaint. And Ebuka contributed nothing. Not money, not effort, not even gratitude. Yet Amaka carried it all, smiling through exhaustion, holding on to one thing, one promise, that one day he would marry her. Slowly, quietly, almost unnoticed at first, Amaka began to lose herself. The same young woman who once balanced her responsibilities with grace started to slip under the weight of a love that only took and never gave. The money she used to send home stopped coming. Her parents waited. Her siblings hoped. But her hands were now tied to a different burden. "I will send it next week," she would whisper to herself, knowing deep down that next week might never come. Even her appearance began to change. The glow that once made heads turn faded into dullness. Her hair, once neatly braided and cared for, became rough and unkempt. Her clothes, once simple but clean and bright, now looked worn, tired, like they had carried too many worries. When she passed by reflective surfaces, she no longer paused to admire herself. She barely even noticed the difference anymore. At her store, things were no longer the same. The pots that used to be full now looked half empty. The shelves lacked variety. Customers who once gathered began to drift away. "Amaka, you don't have this today," one would ask. She would force a smile. "Come back tomorrow." But tomorrow came with the same emptiness. Yet, inside her small room, Ebuka lacked nothing. He ate well, stretching his legs comfortably after meals, satisfied and relaxed. He slept peacefully, without a single worry about rent, food, or responsibility. And instead of gratitude, his demands only grew. "This food is small," he would complain. "Why didn't you cook meat?" Or, "I need money again. Don't tell me you don't have." And Amaka would find a way. Her friends watched in pain as she faded before their eyes. One afternoon, Ngozi could not hold it in anymore. She stood in front of Amaka, her voice sharp with frustration. "You are feeding a man who will abandon you." The words hung in the air like thunder. Amaka froze, then her face hardened in defense. "Leave me alone," she snapped, her voice louder than they had ever heard. "You don't understand anything. Stop interfering in my life." Adiaze stepped forward, her tone softer but filled with sadness. "Amaka, we are saying this because we love you." But Amaka turned away, her eyes filled with stubborn tears. "I said leave me alone." That was the moment her friends knew. She was no longer listening. And so, they stepped back. Not because they didn't care, not because they had given up on her, but because sometimes the hardest lesson in life is the one a person must learn on their own. And as they walked away, Amaka remained standing there, holding tightly to a love that was slowly destroying everything she used to be. Time passed, and the day finally came. The day Ebuka had always talked about. He completed his apprenticeship. The same young man who once depended on others now stood on his own, opening a workshop, receiving customers, counting money with pride. People began to call him Oga, to respect him, to recognize his growth. And Amaka was filled with joy that could not be measured. She smiled more, worked harder, endured more, because in her heart, she kept repeating the same words. Finally, our future begins. She believed the struggle was over. She believed her patience was about to be rewarded. Months passed, and Ebuka's life changed even more. He rented a beautiful apartment, spacious, well-furnished, everything Amaka had once dreamed of. When she heard the news, her heart swelled with excitement. "He has done it," she whispered to herself, her eyes shining with pride. One evening, she went to see him, her steps filled with hope, her heart full of expectations. As she stood before him, she smiled softly and asked, "Ebuka, can I move in with you now?" There was a pause, a strange pause, but she continued, her voice gentle, hopeful. "Or we can visit my parents so we can start the marriage rites." For a moment, Ebuka just stared at her. Then suddenly, he burst into loud laughter. Not the soft laughter she was used to, but something sharp, something mocking. Amaka's smile slowly faded, confusion filling her eyes. "Ebuka?" she called softly. He shook his head, still laughing. "You?" he said, pointing at her. "Move in with me?" His laughter grew louder, harsher. Then his face changed, his voice turning cold, cutting through her like a blade. "What will I be doing with a lowlife like you?" The words landed heavily, but he wasn't done. He looked her up and down with visible disgust. "Look at yourself," he added, his tone filled with contempt. "Dirty, old, what exactly do you think you have to offer me?" Silence fell. Heavy. Painful. Amaka stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. The same man she had fed, sheltered, sacrificed everything for, now looked at her like she was nothing. In that moment, her world shattered quietly. No scream, no tears yet, just a deep, crushing silence as the truth she had refused to see finally stood before her, undeniable.
Amaka did not remember how she got home that day. She only knew that the moment she stepped inside her room, something in her gave way completely. She shut the door, slid to the floor, and the tears came, heavy, uncontrollable, pouring from a place so deep she could not stop them. Hours turned into days, and Amaka remained indoors, curtains drawn, shutting the world out as if hiding could erase the pain. She cried until her eyes became swollen, until her voice grew hoarse from whispering the same question over and over again. What did I do wrong? Food lost its meaning. She barely ate, sometimes going an entire day without touching anything. Her store remained closed, pots empty. Customers passed by and moved on, and slowly everything she had built began to slip through her fingers. Outside, life moved on without her. Ebuka moved on without her. He laughed, he walked, he lived freely like nothing had happened. Soon, whispers began to spread. Ebuka has a new girl, a younger one. And before the shock could even settle, another news followed quickly, sharp and unforgiving. He has married her. Just like that. No delay, no hesitation, no memory of the woman who had once carried him through his lowest moments. When the news reached Amaka, it did not come with noise. It came with silence. A deeper, colder silence that settled into her bones. This time, even tears struggled to come out. It felt like something inside her had gone numb. Days later, Ngozi and Adaize could not take it anymore. They went to her place, knocking repeatedly until the door finally opened. The moment they saw her, they froze. This was not the Amaka they knew. Her once radiant skin looked dull and tired, her hair rough and neglected, her body thinner, weaker, like life had been drained out of her. Ngozi covered her mouth in shock, her eyes filling with tears she tried to hide. Adaize stepped forward slowly, her voice soft, careful, as if speaking to something fragile. Amaka, she called gently. Amaka said nothing. She only looked at them with empty eyes. The room was heavy with silence, thick with unspoken pain. They didn't insult her. They didn't say we told you so. Instead, Adaize moved closer, took her hand and spoke words that carried both truth and hope. You lost yourself, she said quietly, her voice steady. But you are not lost forever. And for the first time in days, something flickered in Amaka's eyes, something small but still alive. For a long moment, after Adaize's words settled in the air, Amaka sat there, silent, her fingers trembling slightly in her friend's grasp. Then slowly, as if something deep within her had finally awakened, she drew in a shaky breath and stood up. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Ngozi and Adaize exchanged glances, saying nothing, watching as Amaka walked quietly toward the bathroom. She turned on the water and stepped in, letting it run over her body as if she was standing under a waterfall of truth. She picked up the sponge and began to scrub, not just her skin, but everything she had carried for too long. The debt, the exhaustion, the pain that clung to her like a shadow, the shame that had buried her identity. She scrubbed harder, her tears mixing with the water, her breath uneven. I am still here, she whispered to herself, her voice breaking. I am still here. When she stepped out, something had changed. Not completely, but enough. She dressed simply, wrapped her towel around her hair, and later that day, she walked into a salon. The women there looked up, surprised at first, but Amaka sat down quietly. Please, braid my hair, she said softly. As the braids came together, strand by strand, it felt like pieces of her were being restored. When it was done, she stood before the mirror and paused. For a moment, she just stared.
Then slowly, her eyes softened. She reached up, touching her face gently. Beneath the pain, beneath the exhaustion, she saw herself again. Not the broken version, but the woman she used to be, and something stronger. The next morning, Amaka returned to her stall. The place had been neglected, dusty, almost forgotten, but she stood there with quiet determination. Ngozi approached first, folding her arms, but unable to hide the small smile on her face. "So, you have remembered us?" she teased lightly. Amaka gave a faint smile. "I am ready now." Adeze stepped forward, her eyes warm. "Then let's start again." With their help, Amaka borrowed some money. Not much, but enough. She restocked her stall, arranged her goods neatly, wiped down every surface until it shone again. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. Later that evening, she picked up her phone and called home. The moment her mother's voice came through, her composure broke. "Mama," she whispered, tears slipping down her face. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything." Her mother's voice softened immediately. "My daughter, we have been praying for you." Amaka closed her eyes, holding the phone tightly. "I will make it right," she said, her voice firm despite the tears. And for the first time in a long time, those words were not just hope, they were a decision. From that moment on, Amaka began again, not as the same girl who once gave everything blindly, but as a woman who had learned, stronger, wiser, and finally choosing herself.
Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly blossomed into something Amaka had almost forgotten was possible. Progress. Her stall, once empty and struggling, began to come alive again. The pots were fuller, the shelves more stocked, and the familiar sound of customers returning filled the air. "Amaka, your food is still the best," one customer said with a smile. She nodded, her confidence growing quietly. This time she was different. She kept records, she set boundaries, and when someone said, "I will pay later," she replied gently but firmly, "No credit today, please." There was strength in her voice now, a calm authority that hadn't been there before. She became more confident, standing taller, speaking with certainty, more focused, no longer distracted by empty promises, more independent, no longer waiting for anyone to complete her life. And her friends saw it. Ngozi watched her one afternoon, arms folded, a proud smile playing on her lips. "Now this is the Amaka I know," she said with a smile. Adaize nodded softly. "No, this one is even better." Amaka laughed lightly, a sound that carried freedom, real freedom this time. Then one evening, Ngozi appeared at her stall, excitement written all over her face. "You are coming with us," she declared. Amaka looked up confused. "Coming where?" "Birthday party," Ngozi replied quickly. "And don't even start with your excuses." Amaka shook her head immediately. "No, I don't have time for all that." Adaize stepped in, smiling gently. "You have been working too hard. Just come, even if it's for a short while." Amaka hesitated, glancing at her stall, then back at them. "I don't know." Ngozi grabbed her hand playfully. "You are coming, that is final." After a moment, Amaka sighed and then smiled. "Okay, just for a little while." Later that night, as she stepped into the party, something shifted in the atmosphere. Conversation slowed, eyes turned, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world paused. Amaka stood there, simple yet radiant, her beauty no longer hidden, her confidence shining from within. And without saying a word, everyone noticed her. Across the room, seated among a small circle of well-dressed guests, was Chika, a man whose presence did not need noise to be felt. He was wealthy, yes, everyone knew that, but it was not his money that made people respect him. It was his calmness, the way he spoke with intention, the way he carried himself with quiet authority. He was not the loud type, not the one to chase attention, yet attention seemed to find him effortlessly. As conversations flowed around him, his eyes lifted casually, and then he saw her, Amaka. In that moment, everything else faded into the background. The laughter, the music, the voices, all became distant echoes. He watched her for a few seconds, not with lust,
not with curiosity, but with a kind of recognition that surprised even him. He leaned slightly toward his friend beside him and said in a calm, certain tone, "This is my wife." His friend turned sharply, confused. Who? Chika did not take his eyes off her. That lady, I am going to marry her. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt, just quiet certainty. Moments later, he stood up and walked toward her. Amaka noticed him approaching, her heart beating just a little faster, unsure why. When he stopped in front of her, he gave a small, respectful nod. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady and warm. "My name is Chika." Amaka smiled politely. "Good evening." There was something different about him, something calm, something grounded. "Can I sit?" he asked. She nodded gently. From that moment, everything felt different. Chika did not rush her, did not overwhelm her with empty words. He listened when she spoke. He asked questions that mattered, and when he complimented her, it came with sincerity, not exaggeration. "You carry strength in a very quiet way," he told her once, looking directly into her eyes. "It is rare." Amaka felt seen, not used, not admired for surface beauty alone, but understood. And from that day, Chika was intentional. He showed up. He called. He kept his word. He respected her space, her work, her journey. Where Ebuka had taken, Chika gave. Where Ebuka had demanded, Chika supported. Within weeks, what they shared became undeniable, something steady, something real. And just as he had said, Chika did not waste time. They got married, not in confusion, not in desperation, but in clarity. And marriage with Chika was not a promise of struggle. It was a partnership of growth. He expanded her business, turning her small stall into something bigger, something structured. He brought her parents closer, giving them comfort and dignity. He made sure her siblings returned to school, their future no longer uncertain. And through it all, Amaka stood there, not as someone who had been rescued, but as a woman who had finally met a man who understood her worth and chose to build with her. It was a quiet afternoon when Amaka's car suddenly developed a fault right in the compound. She stepped out, looking at it with mild concern, and reached for her phone. Moments later, Chika's voice came through, calm as always. "Don't stress yourself," he said gently. "I will send my mechanic. Just stay there." Amaka nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Okay." Not long after, the sound of a vehicle pulling up broke the silence. The gate opened and the mechanic stepped in, wiping his hands on a rag as he walked closer. But the moment his eyes landed on Amaka, he stopped. His expression changed instantly. It was Ebuka. For a second, time stood still. Then suddenly, he let out a mocking laugh, loud and sharp. "Amaka," he said, shaking his head as he looked her up and down. "So, you are now working here as a maid?" His tone was filled with ridicule, his smile dripping with disrespect. Amaka stood still, her face calm, her eyes steady. She said nothing, not a single word. At that moment, the door behind her opened and Chika stepped out, adjusting his sleeve slightly as his eyes moved from Amaka to the man standing before her. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice firm but controlled. Ebuka straightened a bit, trying to compose himself, but the smirk was still lingering. "Nothing, sir. I was just..." Chika cut him off, his gaze sharp now. "Why are you laughing at my wife?" The words landed heavily. My wife. Ebuka froze completely. His mouth parted slightly, his eyes widening in disbelief as he turned slowly back to look at Amaka. "Your wife?" he repeated, his voice no longer confident but shaken. The same woman he had once called a lowlife, standing before him now as the wife of the man he worked for? Chika's expression hardened. "Get out," he said coldly. "I will not tolerate anyone disrespecting my wife in my house." Ebuka took a step back, already overwhelmed with shame, ready to leave. But Amaka's voice came, calm and steady. "No." Both men turned to look at her. She met Chika's eyes briefly, then spoke again. Let him fix the car first. There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness, just quiet authority. Chika studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, do your job and leave." Ebuka said nothing. He simply walked to the car, his movements slower now, heavier, as if each step carried the weight of his past actions. He walked in silence, no jokes, no confidence, just quiet humiliation hanging over him. When he finished, he wiped his hands, avoiding eye contact. Chika handed him his payment without a word. Ebuka collected it, his fingers slightly trembling, then turned and walked out of the compound without looking back. And as the gate closed behind him, the silence he left spoke louder than anything he could have said. After that day, Ebuka returned to a home that no longer felt like peace, but punishment. His wife's voice filled the house every day. Sharp, unkind, never gentle. "Ebuka, you are useless," she would shout at the slightest mistake. "Is this what I married?" There was no warmth, no respect, no calm place to rest his mind. The home he once rushed into with pride now felt like a battlefield he could not escape. And in the quiet moments, when the noise finally faded, regret would sit with him. He would stare at nothing, remembering Amaka. Not the broken version he insulted, but the woman she once was. Her kindness, her patience, the way she would cook without complaint, even when she had nothing left. The way she forgave easily, loved deeply, and gave without measure. "She stayed when I had nothing," he whispered to himself one night, his voice breaking. But now it was too late. Regret had become his closest companion, sitting beside him in silence, reminding him of what he destroyed with his own hands. Meanwhile, Amaka's life bloomed in a completely different direction. She no longer woke up with fear or uncertainty. She woke up with purpose. She had children now, their laughter filling her home like music she had long been denied. Her business had grown into something stable, something respected. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. And at the center of it all was Chika, a man who loved her not with words alone, but with actions, consistency, and respect. She was surrounded by love, true love, surrounded by respect, earned and freely given, surrounded by peace, the kind she once thought she would never know again. And sometimes, in quiet reflection, Amaka would sit and understand something deeply. Some people come into your life not to stay forever, but to reveal your worth. Some come to use you, and some come to break you. But life, in its own wisdom, always gives you a chance to arise again. Because love was never meant to drain you or destroy you. And the right person, the one truly meant for you, will not break you. They will build you.